Good morning, everybody. Today is January... What day is today? January 21st of 2022. Another fine day in the world of the COVID pandemic. Today we're going to go back in time another 200 years and forget that that's happening. And we're going to talk about the fictitious rendition of the Battle of Friedland. So the Battle of Friedland was not fought with the factions you'll see here today. As you can kind of tell, it's a bit of a foggy map. But we have the Prussians on the left flank here, we've got the Russians in the center left, the Americans pulling up in reserve in the center right, and the Austrians pulling up onto a rather large line of battle on the right. And I'm going to pause here so I can explain a few things. I was playing as the Americans in this version, in this battle. They're not quite played terribly awfully much right now in the mod, and that's kind of because they're in a weird spot, but they are a really cool faction, and I do thoroughly enjoy them. They are getting an update in the next version of the mod, which I will talk about what mod this is in about a hot second, but the US will be receiving a massive revamp, which is arguably going to make them a little weak, but they're going to have a lot of really fun playstyles, and I won't say any more until it comes out. This mod is Napoleon Total War Darthmod Hardcore Realism. It is a ton of fun. It takes the essence of Darthmod and tries to apply a bit more of a realistic filter to it. So instead of having units that will just charge into the maws of death and fight to the last, they will be a little more human with how they react. Artillery really shakes up a battalion when they're hit by a gunnery. And in general, it just makes things a little more complicated in terms of not difficulty in gameplay per se, but you can't be quite as feckless as you might otherwise be. Anywho, to talk about my army, so the American army has a pretty standard contingent of line. We have these wonderful 18-pound Columbiad guns, which are rather nice. That's not what they're actually called. They're just 18-pound foot artillery, but in the War of 1812, which is what the in-game American army is based off of, that's indeed what the gun would have been, a Columbiad, if I recall correctly. So that's what these bad boys are. Very good, accurate guns, rapid firing. The American Artillery Corps in this war was relatively well trained. Most of their the West Point cadets, which graduated during the war, went into the Engineer Corps and the artillery arm of the military. So they had a lot of very well trained, practically trained as well, officers who knew what they were doing in the artillery. So it's kind of their strength. Foot Rangers and Rifles, again, another standard line. I have a battalion of Marines in here somewhere, as well as a bunch of named, very well drilled regular army units, plus some fun Indiana riflemen, which I've deployed one unit to the front of the Austrian 6-pound battery, and I quickly threw down stakes, and I deployed some over here, and I'm trying to throw down stakes, but these Danish hussars do not like that idea, so they're going to go try to dissuade that. Austrians mean, actually, you know what? Before we continue with the armies, let's do something a little more important. Well, zooming out doesn't do awfully much because of the fog, thick as pea soup. But let's look at the map, at least top right. So looking at this map top right, we'll make a very brief analysis. Friedland is obviously where the weight of the battle is going to be. It's worth 3 points. We have, I believe it's Kloskanan, and I think it's Heinrichsdorf. The eye seems to be hidden behind one of the buildings, but I believe it's Heinrichsdorf. Then we've got, what is that? What is the name? Pastenin and Mulhau off here on the southeast. Pardon my pronunciation. I'm giving the umlaut my best. So, bearing in mind in the Napoleon Total War Darthmod historical or hardcore realism multiplayer rules, each house is worth 1 point. There's 1, 2, and 3, and then 3 here and 4. So the Allies need to essentially capture 1 more point to secure the victory, or just go straight for Friedland, and if they can capture Friedland, there's not really that much of a good chance we're going to get these ones back. So this map is a bit of an attack-defense map. The coalition you're seeing here is the defending side of the battle. Friedland is here. Actually, funnily enough, the Americans are in it. The 1-pointer is off here, if I recall correctly. Actually, I think this is the 1-pointer right here. So the 1-pointer is here. Friedland is here. You have this river that is rather uncrossable except for bridges. This river is also rather unnavigable except for this little bridge here. And this creek slash river, which is fordable all the way up here, just provides this series of estuaries and swamplands, which makes maneuver difficult. Same thing here. This river is rather fordable, except at this deeper point. You can cross it here, you can cross it here, you can cross all of this, but as you can see from the dark greenery, a lot of marshy ground along this. So these rivers do provide some natural barriers and dissuade players from attacking, and that will be a problem later in the battle. The Russians forming up in the center. You can see where they're putting their reserves. You could have a gander. They have a light cavalry brigade. They have standard general, good unit of Pavlovsk's Life Guard, and Preobrazhensky. So a very elite reserve brigade. Moscow Musketeers on the right, with just a line of musketeers extending to the left. 10-pound unicorn, which is effectively just a modern-day howitzer. A 10-pound unicorn really screws people's days up. That's a good gun. That thing hits like a brick. Prussians, meanwhile, have a really fun army. They've got Blücher leading the command with 2 very classic Death's Head Hussars units and a light cavalry elite Hussar brigade. On the left, skirmishers moving forward in front of a line of musketeers. And he basically just has a bunch of Prussian musketeers with an elite brigade of foot guards in reserve. So a very heavy line of musketeers, very few light infantry. This is a very compact, dense, not fragile force. Cavalry's going to have a hard time dealing with this because everything in here can basically square with the exception of the sharpshooters. So not a lot of cavalry, but every infantry battalion in this army can fend for its own. Same thing over here, not a lot of cavalry, only the 2 units of hussars, but again, every infantry battalion here can square. Not a lot of artillery either, only the 7-pound howitzer in the Prussian army and only the 10-pound unicorn here. I took quite a good deal of artillery because the American army really likes it. They like their 5-inch howitzer as well as their 18-pounder, and I've got a very diverse force. Same thing with the Austrians over here. 6-pound battery. You've got some Hungarians and Germans. Now, I actually have been trying to avoid showing battle replays with the Austrians in them because as of right now, they are a little bit overpowered. The size of the battalions is too much. They have these massive, chunky 300-man battalions compared to the standard 240, which you can see over here. So that number is being nerfed down to 280 to represent the larger Austrian battalion overall, but not let them be too OP. At the same time, the stats for these units are a little broken. German Fusiliers right now, or Hungarian Fusiliers, I think right now have 7 morale, bearing in mind the average morale of the standard line infantry unit in the game is 6. So and the Germans have 6 morale as well. So these guys have very good melee stats and very good morale. It is a little wild how well they can do. So I think they're kind of an instant win take army right now. This was a friendly game. This was not a hardcore game. It was an official game per the Discord, but everybody playing in this was friends. We were all pals, so I don't think anyone minded Austria being brought. That being said, the reason I'm showing this replay with Austria is because Austria actually gets put on the back foot really, really, really hard in this game, and the attacking Danish player does a very good job of essentially going punch for punch with the Austrians, bearing in mind that, again, the Austrians are an OP faction in the current mod of the game, or version of the mod. And again, it just says a lot about the skill of the Danish player and how effective they were in beating the snot out of the Austrian player. That said, the Austrian player gave it as well as they took it. This was a pretty big bloodbath over here, and I'll let you watch it. But again, it's because of how brutal the fight was on the right and how roughed up the Austrians got. I don't feel too bad showing this replay with an army that is even the mathematical standards. I've spent some time analyzing the stats of all the units, or the standard units in the game, and the Austrians are undoubtedly statistically superior in so many ways. Even per cost per man and battalion, the ratio favors them highly. So usually I wouldn't show this, but in this one I will. Anyway, let's catch on with the game. We'll start playing it. You can see where the deployments are favored here. I'm going to turn my sound up just an eensy-weensy bit. I'm trying to throw stakes up, but these Hussars are not having it. Now, luckily, there's some Austrian covering fire. It might take a few of my Indiana riflemen out before they get too far back. But at least that unit is there too far into the woods, and they do scare off the Hussars. And this unit will come back. Austrian player just deploys straight into a line of battle. Stakes in front of the 6-pound battery, and this will form the crick of his line. He's positioned it rather nicely, looking down this road. He's got his stakes here. Now, it's worth mentioning that we actually tried to organize this game, and I hilariously dropped within 5 minutes right about here in the last time we tried to host this. So we rehosted and tried again. So the enemy team kind of knew where I was trying to go from the beginning. I should have been smarter here and put my cavalry out front to act as a speed bump. So you're going to, see that the Danish player will get a very cheeky charge off on me. And we'll come back to that. Really beautiful mod in terms of the scale. Prussians have this very nice position here where they're using this wood line. They've used their Brunswick sharpshooters to deploy stakes all the way to the flank. Wow, geez, I didn't think they'd reach that far. I didn't actually pay a lot of attention to the flanks because there was so much happening in this game. So you might see me have a few moments of revelation, I suppose you might say. But that's a very strong position. They've got this river here. They're in the woods, so they're totally hidden. The enemy has to kind of come out of the open. This is a very strong flank. Also a strong position, but it favors the attacker here because they've got a few hills, a few good rises to put artillery on if they do decide to press forward, including this high ground here, which will shoot into this area, as well as over here. Friedland is, as I said, an attack-defense map, but there is a lot of ground that favors the attacker. A good battery in this position can afford some central fire. This town offers a good staging point. There are a lot of places where an attack is helpful. There's a lot of good open ground here for an attacker to maneuver. And as long as you have a shooting army, a very firepower-oriented army, you don't have to worry too much about this river stymieing your advance. So it seems like the Danes have 2 cavalry squadrons going this way. One was a heavy who disappeared, and I think they're probing to see if you can cross this river. I don't think you can, except at this fording area. It's a little too deep. I think historically there must have been some sort of flooding or something. I'm not too sure. But yeah, as you can see from the lighter water here, this is the only place you can ford it. This must have been... Yeah, here we go. Let's zoom over here quick. Bavarian Hussars sprinted up the center, and I tried to get here fast enough to save most of my guns. I started unlimbering them. And the crew, I did get most of them away. 20 out of 34 gunners. And I do lose an unfortunate amount of my 1st Rifle Regiment, which is a shame because that is quite a good regiment. But I do manage to get this gun back. So this is where my 18-pounder is going to be for the rest of the game. But it did get touched. We did shatter that unit of Hussars, though, so killing 14 crew and dealing some preliminary damage to my regulars and rifles, this was not a good trade for me. But you know what? The gun is where it's supposed to be, and I'm happy for that. So let's fast forward a little bit. This is such an impregnable position. These stakes make that cavalry flank hard. And the way it's done, too, is the stakes are here, so that dissuades a cavalry move. And then you've got this river here. This river provides such a good natural speed bump to anything happening. You just have so much time as a result of it to react to what's happening around you. Russian player with a little bit of a cautious deployment here. But to our front, maybe we could use this time to talk about some of the armies. We had a bunch of Bavarians facing us. We had the Bavarians on our left with an already chevroned up. I guess they spawned in with a chevron. Gives a little more accuracy and reload to the unit, so they had a chevroned up howitzer. And who are they trying to nail? Probably the center of the line. Yeah, it looks about right. Yep. Aiming for the center. Bavarians on the left. Kingdom of Italy in the center. Fighting mostly the Russians, but linking here. And then I was very lucky, because I had the joint between the Italians and this Bavarian army, and then the Danes were here. So what was happening is the enemy was trying to concentrate and fall on one part of our line, but they had a weak center. So it was basically my job to keep poking this center, and if possible and if practicable, maybe do a flanking maneuver to either side of the enemy armies. Make a breakthrough here, and then go left or go right, basically using this road to create an interior line to threaten the right flank of the Bavarian-Danish push here, or threaten the left flank of the Italian-Danish here. Now, unfortunately, I could only go really so far in strategic terms, because the same natural defenses which are giving us strength on Friedland's defense are giving them strength within their own interior lines. Now, granted, this creates what I would refer to as a pinching point. Oh, hold on, I'll keep that analysis up in a second. I thought I saw an opportunity here to cheekily go for Italy's artillery, and I think... Yep, yeah, I see he's moving up these guards of honor. United States Light Horse Militia, very cheap, swift, inexpensive cavalry unit. But not that good against direct combat, so I'm going to retreat them back. But anyway, it creates a pinch point. I'll slow down to explain this a little bit. Interior lines are basically, you can kind of see here, right? Interior lines is this safe area behind your army. And I'll pause because this is actually this is a real-life military strategy used in linear warfare. And even in modern warfare today, it's part of maneuver warfare overall. There's a great line from... I think it's General Nathan Bedford Forrest of the Civil War. He says, get there firstest with the mostest, right? And that means, you know, arrive to the point that you want to seize quicker than the enemy with superior numbers, right? And the reason you want to get there first with superior numbers is obviously local strength, whatever, but if you get there first, usually you can establish a position of dominance there, including interior lines, right? And interior lines are integral to any position of strength. What interior lines are these safe areas around which your army can maneuver. You can position your reserves there, as you can see from where my infantry battalion reserves are. Scots Brigade, these dragoons, all my cavalry's in reserve, my artillery's back here. I've got my whole army is here. This is an interior line. This is over here an interior line. Over here, especially with the Russians, this is the definition of an interior line. Essentially, this is an area that lets you kind of stage reinforcements and maneuver and also move things around the battlefield in ways where they're not going to be harassed and slowed down by the enemy. If there's cavalry back here, it will create difficulties of maneuver where you have to be on your guard and approach a little more cautiously, but interior lines allow you freedom of movement. Interior lines are specifically defined by areas of egress that are beneficial to enhance maneuverability. So this bridge, for example, crossing this river, this is a very good point of movement for interior lines. This road is the definition of an interior line. We can move swiftly between points of the battlefield using these roads. Having these fords is very useful. If the enemy, let's make an example, if this Danish player is able to punch down this road, and ignoring all this, let's say he punches a hole down this road. Well, now he has this road here where if the Italian player can pin this Russian player, and the Russians have to commit all their reserves, well, the Danish player not only can attack the flank of the Russian, but he can use this road through the marshland to move even swiftly with an encirclement. And the combined pressure, assuming that the Prussians were defeated so soundly that the Danish or the Bavarians on this flank are intact, that would allow a swift encirclement and destruction of the Russians. Now, over here, another line of interior would be this road that lets us move around, as well as these roads here. So I'll play the battle, and I will let you guys watch a little bit and just kind of see this assault on the right with the Bavarians moving in. Not a lot going on here, just some skirmishing. I finally managed to get my stakes down. And the Jaegers are going to start poking holes in this line. Such a cool view. I don't know. It's just it's cool to just look over and see the distance between these units. I mean, this Hungarian Fusilier unit is getting nailed down. 30% casualties already from Jaegers. That's not good. Really using the advantage of that light infantry. Nothing too crazy here to comment on. Italians putting their battery on a position of strength here. I'm not quite sure what it was. I think it was a 6 or a 9 pound battery, but this was very good. Some minor counter battery. Kind of the opening artillery duel stage of the game. We could be defensive, kind of force the enemy to commit since we were holding the ground, but this is where a lot of the real action happens. And I'll leave this here so you can kind of get a strategic overview. The Austrian players interspersed his lines with units of Grenzers to provide localized fire support, which was a very nice touch. Bearing in mind, Grenzers can't square. That's one of the rock, paper, scissors things of this game, right? Is light infantry shoots very well, and the whole battalion fires versus the front rank of line. Oh, that's a murderous volley ripping. Jesus. Oh, and they oh, it's, you know what it is? It's just the howitzer combined with the infantry, or the volley of the Grenzers. That's a pretty brutal rout right there.
Sir, our general is under attack.
I'm just trying to hammer this unit with 18-pound artillery. And when 18-pounder hits, it really hits. It does a lot of morale damage. Sit here for a second, let you get an angle. Standing under artillery fire must be such a pants-browning experience. Let's zoom in on that for a second. That's a crazy shot. Ooh, killed one of my gunners there. My rangers skirmishing with the line infantry here, doing good work. These foot rangers are very sharp shots. And they do know what they're doing. And this line is just a little too far out, and they're in the woods under some pretty heavy bombardment. When you're standing in this little creek here, it's hard to get out of it, and that means when you commit to that position, it's hard to get out of it, especially if it's not to your advantage. And in this moment, when this guy is sitting here, it's not good. I'm gonna try to make a push. Light horse militia. You can't expect a lot of them, but they're good for little throwaway charges like this. And they do rout, but they touch this unit, and they break them. But the thing is this unit will come back 3 or 4 times. I'll pull this maneuver a few times. And they're good, because this rout mechanic is actually quite beneficial if you know how to use it correctly. When you know the unit is going to rout basically on impact. Ooh, as I shoot 3 of them off their own horses with my artillery. Whoops. This unit, as you just saw, will get out of dodge before it suffers too many casualties. So in a way, routing on impact is not that terrible of an idea, because it allows the unit to retreat, reform behind in a safe position, and it gives you time to pull everything back together, unless you keep hitting it with your own artillery, which is what I do. But I've got to keep a clear line up the center, because that's where my 12-pounder is shooting. So I begin realizing here that the Bavarians are half here and half here, and my whole army strength is concentrated here. The Austrians are in this very thin but steady line here. My Indiana riflemen pulling back. I'm concentrated for an assault, and he's not. So I'm going to slowly push up, because the battle's still quite young. We're only 50 minutes in, not too many casualties overall. I'm going to slowly push up under the idea of maybe splitting the enemy here and making them recombine their forces and forcing this Bavarian player to pull off some of his units on the left to come reinforce this center. Because if I can get here, this is the pinch point, right? I've separated their army. I'm making reinforcement between the two very difficult. And I can in turn subdivide my army and roll up this flank and roll up this flank. They have to keep this area of maneuver clear of me, because if I get in here, look, I threaten this Italian artillery position. I could threaten this Bavarian artillery position. This is very valuable ground strategically for them, because if I get it, I have very good threat fronts for both armies, both of which are on the offensive, by the way, or will be shortly. So this is very valuable ground, and I will begin pushing into it relatively soon. Meanwhile, very interesting Ulan charge here. Garde du Corps do catch him out, but you know what? The Ulans can regain energy faster than the Garde du Corps, so it's not awful. And these guys do get away with most of their stuff. Turn my game up just a small amount here. So now we can get a good look at what the Danish army is. They've got these 2 units of elites in reserve, very thin lines to reduce artillery casualties. Same thing here. I think they're trying to figure out what they're going to do to attack this line, probing the Austrians, trying to see where their weaknesses are. The Austrians are deployed pretty far out, though, because what they have to do is they have to cover all this ground right to the river. If they don't do that, the enemy will move forward and more than likely seize this town. They were probably trying to figure out how to cross here. I think this map is a little bit bugged because there actually is no point to cross on this river, I think, until probably about here. So if we lose this part of the battle, they can cross here and get this one-pointer. Oh no, I guess that's not the one-pointer. This is the one-pointer. It's not this one, it's this one. So this guy's got to cover a lot of ground, but he's let me concentrate, and I'm going to engage a little bit, skirmish, and do some damage to the enemy. I'm going to outshoot these Jaegers. We get these very bold cavalry charges coming up the center throughout the game. I will manage to get a square off before he pulls out. Oh no, he did pull out in this one. But the regulars will inflict some casualties as they retreat. And that's pretty good for me. I think I turned my sound up just a little too much. Sorry, guys. I'm still trying to figure out what the best sound combination is when I'm doing these videos. Again, I'm not a professional recorder. I do this stuff more of a passion project, so you'll have to bear with my growing pains. By the way, the video quality here should be much crisper than the first 3 videos, and the audio should be good. So we'll find out. Prussians not terribly engaged over here. Big, thick lines here. I don't know if I would have had quite as many men on the front. Maybe have some of that in reserve and maybe extend a little more to the right. I don't know. But he did good. Russians in very thin lines moving up. 10-pound unicorn. And you can see where the assault is beginning to happen. The Bavarians, feeling threatened, will begin moving back to this town, as I was hoping. So I'm successfully pulling men. Okay, yeah, there we go. Pulling men off of this main battle line. And these Sjælland Jaegers, this Danish player, I think it was Mobster is his name. Mobster is an expert at using these friggin' light infantry to really pummel people. And if you don't know how to deal with them, it's tough to work with. And the Austrian player, unfortunately, did not have any light cavalry. The way to deal with these Jaegers, who are going to be so far out and so close, is you have to push your infantry forward in tandem with a light cavalry charge, and you can usually catch them out a little bit. They can't square, and they actually don't even have bayonets. But as you can see, what he's doing is he's running them back, and he's got to constantly run these Ulans out to catch them, and I think he does here. Yeah, it's a pretty big knockdown. And that might even rout them, too. No, they might have the local superiority. Yeah, they're going to try to retreat into this square. Oh, man. It must be so terrifying to be caught in this crossfire, as I'm sure you could tell from these guys routing. It must be so scary to be caught in this crossfire where you're trying to run to the safety of your army and get into a square and find some form of refuge from the cavalry, only to be caught by the panicked shots of your own infantry trying to shoot the horsemen behind you. That's got to be a terrifying experience. Anyway, these Ulans, I think, do come back, but that's kind of the problem, is when you don't have the right tool for the job, you sort of have to make do with what you got. And these Ulans are now tired. He's got another unit here. He's going to try to sneakily pull through the woods, but, you know, he's only got 3 cavalry, or yeah, he's only got 4 cavalry units, and one of them is already pretty combat deterred, just running down light infantry, and he's suffered a significant amount of infantry casualties just along his line from the fire. Jaeger's regrouping all the 50% casualties. And I don't think these sharpshooters... Yeah. Here's the river. Look at how slow they get going to that river. They are going to catch some of them out, though. And again, look, they're caught in the crossfire and men just get mowed down by friendly fire. Look at that. A lot of guys dying from friendly fire. They'll probably come back, but that's a lot of them dead. All the dead riflemen here. Friendly fire is never friendly. Meanwhile, over here, the Austrians trying to form up for an attack in tandem with the Bavarians to move on to the Russian side. Let's sit back a little bit and let this cinematic experience unfold. Let you focus on this part of the battle for a second. Sometimes it's nice just to sit back and have a moment to look at what's happening in a given area. When you're moving around the camera this much, it can be difficult to really appreciate the dispositions of a force and kind of have a moment to think about, oh, what would you do in this situation, you know? And I think sometimes just stopping what you're doing and looking at an area really lets you appreciate the difficulties of these battles. If you're the Bavarian player and you got to try to assault this, I mean, again, let's go back to his point of view. From the POV of the... Here, we'll be here where you've got this joint... Wow, these chasseurs have really been attrited. I guess you try to make a cavalry charge into these stakes. Oh, yeah, look at that, yep. That's... What are those uniforms? Oh, yeah, these are Russian hussars. I suppose some Russian hussars try to charge in, and I guess they did touch these chasseurs, and as you can see, but ran to the stakes, and they probably routed a little bit. I wonder if they came back. I'm not seeing them. Well, anyway... Keeping an eye on my flank, too. Oh, hold on a second. This was a really... interesting moment. It's when I begin pushing my lines forward, and as you can see, I'm doing this in a combined arms fashion. I'm moving things up all together. And I'm going to try to weigh on this Bavarian player and kind of give them a death by 1,000 cuts. This D. Firth regiment is very good, very big, very fresh, kept in reserve, and these guys really hit like a sack of bricks. So what I've got to do is try to give them the most firepower I can. Fortunately, both of my battalions are shooting out this line unit. So these D. Firth are really going to chew me up over here. So this is not quite in my favor yet. But it will be once this unit runs. It's going to attempt a cavalry charge. Which I will square. And he'll pull off. But he's going to lose a lot of these garde du corps. This is an expensive unit. Oh, man. Oh, Jesus. An expensive unit to have that happen to. Luckily, though, this will actually cause my line to reset who it's targeting and shoot at the D. Firth. I don't know if it's D. Firth or D. Firth. I think, whatever. I imagine D. Firth. Grenadier columns. This Danish player being real cheeky over here. This was a really funny play, or fun play to watch. He's going to go in and he's going to try to catch out this unit. And I think he may. I don't think I walked back fast enough. He'll pull off, though, and he was going to go for these Indiana guys, and then he's going to go for these regulars. But here's the problem. Let's pause for a second and analyze. As cool as this is, look at how overextended this player is. His infantry support's not pulled up. This is a pretty big maneuver to ask of men. You're asking guys to charge into combat under artillery fire against relatively fresh units. Yes, this one's a little combat attrited, about 50% casualties almost. But I have all of this cavalry nearby. I've got allied artillery providing close-range canister if need be. I have most of my army in reserve. My general can pull up at a moment's notice. These grenadiers have been put right into the heart of the enemy line, and while they are fresh, they are not that well supported. I think if the Bavarian players had moved up here, Bavarian general had moved up some infantry to support this, these two units might have stayed, but it was because they received some closing fire and they are charging in unsupported. They're going to start routing. This is a really good example of the difficulties of a joint attack on an area. It's difficult to coordinate all of the moving pieces. When this Danish player decides to go in with these two grenadier battalions, this would have been a really good move, and I have no doubt that if the Danish player was in command of all of these units, he probably would have had them moving up before the run even started. And the idea probably would have been to move up, and then by the time they are finished moving and the grenadiers have fought the combat, they'll have control over all this ground. Let me say that a different way, because maybe that's a smidge confusing. If you move up your infantry at the same time of a charge happening, so let's say these lines moved up to here as these guys connected. By the time these grenadiers win this melee, your line is reestablished here, so they're within friendly lines rather than being overextended still punching into the enemy. So you really have to kind of move your lines forward to become invested in a charge. And that allows you to keep these units, number one, and also if you do need to give them some support, you know, if as you can see here, I could swing this cavalry around and hit these grenadiers in the flank if there's a worst case scenario, and I have multiple units here I can do so with. I can use this light horse to block for a few seconds this guard to corps unit. I would have lost that combat because this is basically the most elite Bavarian cavalry versus my cheapest cavalry. But it would have bought me precious seconds to move these Boston Hussars in, let these Empress Cuirassiers go in, my generals nearby. I can swiftly run up my other cavalry here, my 7th New York Dragoons and my U.S. Dragoons. I could do a lot to move stuff in here with the time I've bought. And meanwhile, the Italian player is here in some strength, but obviously the vast majority of his force is over here trying to fight the Russians. As I've said before, I'm going to continuously benefit from attacking a joint between two armies. I mean, technically three if you think the Austrians are here. But anyway, let's get back to the battle. So these grenadiers, as cool as this charge is, are going to immediately rout. He's also charging through a swampy marsh. Oh. Move my light horse militia to try to pursue these guys and make them continue routing. Charge bug being weird. But I'm going to try to shatter this grenadier battalion. I don't know why these guys didn't go in. Now, I got to pause for one more moment. Moments like, I forgot to mention too, so the same thing that happened to me, this micro difficult, or happened to the enemy, over here, this difficulty of micromanaging, happened over here. I was so busy dealing with all this that I didn't notice these dragoons charge in and grab my first rifle regiment until it was a little too late. So every critique I have of players splitting their micro can apply to me as well. And this is a good example of it here. I was busy, and then while my attention was over here, my rifles get caught out. But I didn't pause to explain that. What I paused to explain is why you're seeing all of my units going into this weird formation here. So I accidentally, I think, hit a button and another button and clicked, and I think it selected my whole army, or the vast majority of my army, and it told them to all go over here. So what you'll see is this confusion in my lines where everything is moving and reforming, and it's very dangerous because I'm doing so under the eyes of the enemy in, I think, musket range at this point, while cavalry is technically in my line. So this is a very dangerous situation to be in. I'm not too enraged by it, and I actually chuckled in-game when it happened, because when moments like this occur, the way I interpret them in my head is this is kind of a moment of command confusion in the battlefield. In real life, these situations happened all the time. Commanders became confused. They misread a dispatch from a superior officer ordering a movement of some variety. So whenever these things happen, I just kind of chuckle to myself and say, oh no, there was confusion in the lines. And so this is kind of thematic, right? The Americans fence with the Danes and repulse an elite charge by, or a charge by one of the strongest Danish brigades. Two combined grenadier battalions get repulsed by militia, effectively, and some regulars. And, and while, we want to feel good and high and mighty about that, and then God has a funny sense of humor and decides to confuse our battalion commanders, and they think there's been a rally order over here on the left. Maybe we can make up a story, the charge of the Italian dragoons in here, maybe make some brigade commanders over here think that the Italians are pressing through the woods, and they're going to come on in greater numbers. I don't know, maybe there's some panic setting in, so the lines begin compressing this way. But I'm going to try to reestablish order pretty swiftly, as you could see. Just try to unscrew this fustercluck, and I actually walk under fire here, this light horse militia. Not good for them. That's going to do a lot of damage to them. Would have been nice to have those troopers, but I'm just going to decide to pull units back. I'd rather have them pulled back than out of position. But I'm going to try to reform this line. Now, fortunately, this Italian player, he did this and he wanted to capitalize off of it, but he couldn't because he was so busy over here trying to lead an attack on the Russians, who are going to try to charge across the river and grab these chasseurs. But unfortunately, he's a little overextended. Not as extended as the Danes were, because he does have these 2 units, but he is overextended, and he's going to think better of it and retreat before this unit collapses. Not without stabbing a few of these chasseurs. Very intense sharp fighting here. Prussians not too tested on that flank. So I've reestablished some semblance of order. I've sent these dragoons packing. And my riflemen did come back, but they're tired, so I'm going to let them sit for a little bit. But I've reestablished my lines. They're not quite what I wanted, because I would have preferred to have my Scots Brigade in reserve and maybe not have these guys be where they are. But again, everything kind of became a little bit confused there, and I kind of had to do what I had to do. Oof, unfortunately, friendly fire over here. Let's go back to the Austrians here. The Austrians are holding the ground that they were on originally, but they're getting pressed on for sure. These Seelen Jaegers are taking their toll. They're doing a lot of damage, and he's got a lot of units online here. He's got his Imperial Guard units. His most elite units are mixed in with some of his basic line, and what that means is he doesn't really have reserves. If there's a hole in the Austrian line, they can't put something in to plug it. He has to pull back so he can shorten his line. And he's fighting, as you can see, the entire Danish army here with elements of the Bavarians. And I'm trying to hold my center here and do a bit of a push on this flank to relieve pressure on the Russians, and then I have to do something over here to help him. And so my idea here is if I can just occupy some of the enemy's time while not weakening the center, because if we lose this, there's going to be a massive hole in the center. Maybe we can do something. And this Bavarian player really likes chevroning his men, so these are actually quite good units. They're heavily attrited, but they've got 4 more accuracy than their base, and they've got 2 more morale than their base, I believe. So those chevrons really do good work. But I'm trying to leave a hole for my 18-pounder to shoot through. Unfortunately, I do nail some of my own dragoons in the process, but I eventually do figure out what's going on, and I move them. But this Austrian player is doing a good job stymieing any assault. But you know what it is the Danish player was good. He realized they had an hour to make this attack work, and what he could do is he could take his time, move up his skirmishers, and really just force these Uhlans to take unnecessary casualties, trying to maneuver and get them. As you can see, he's really given this player a good run for his money. So he's taking his time, he's letting his light infantry do his work, he's using his artillery to really nail these Uhlans down and go for the enemy cavalry, while I'm trying to engage the enemy here and just do damage to them. The Bavarian light infantry too, or Jaegers, are also doing the same thing. So this player, he's just got to stand under fire and take it, because he can't yield ground, otherwise the enemy will pull over. Maybe it's advisable that he should have been behind this line of creeks, but you know what, his guns are here too, which is nice though, because he does get some nice canister off. Let's watch for a second and see what else it does. I'm a little too far away. I catch out his dragoons at mine. This line begins advancing forward. My rifle regiment being shot in the back of the face a little bit, and I'm going to move them out of the way soon, but I was busy over here microing. Again, micromanaging is a difficult thing, and errors in micromanaging build up to a lot of casualties that are unnecessary, a lot of friendly fire. Playing with skirmishers is possibly one of the most difficult things in the game, because you end up in situations like this where you kind of want to keep them in the line of fire fighting because they just are free kills if you manage to hit someone. But they are so vulnerable to your own mistakes as much as the enemies. I got my foot rangers over here supporting the right flank of the musketeers, trying to nail these Dalmatian chasseurs, and if possible even try to get some of these. The Italian player has thrown stakes down on this road, so he has neutered any ability of my cavalry to really make meaningful pushes over here, and he's here in strength as well. Big assault on the right. Bavarian player commits some of his cavalry, but they get caught in a square, and they're going to lose that Garde du Corps unit. That's an expensive mistake. Over here, the situation has not much changed. Prussian player begins moving to heavily support the Russian left. Finally, these chasseurs are going to run, and these guys are probably going to run shortly as well because they're just getting nailed, especially given how close they are to the enemy. Ooh. Oof. Now, American shooting is not bad. It's not the best, but it's not bad. It's pretty good, relatively above average. They've got better reload than most and decent accuracy. And I've got strength in numbers here. So we're going to engage in a brawl, and I will win this in terms of firepower. No proud flag. Let's go to the source of that yelling. Oh yes, the Garde du Corps unit tried to go in. Luckily I had my dragoons in a area of deterrence. Cheeky Fusilier charge to get these Jaegers. Unfortunately, that means they're going to get collapsed on, and this unit will go the way of the dodo. This battery will help a little bit. My rifles are nice. They have awful accuracy, but they got great range because they're rifle troops. So they can shoot quite far. Now I'm going to begin a major offensive in the center here. I think they're weak. I could see the strength of the Bavarians here. I could see the strength of the Italians here. I see the Prussians moving in. I will do the same thing, and I'm going to try to really threaten this center line. I could see that there's a lot of pressure now being applied rather frontally to my Austrian ally. So I'm going to try to scare their pants off as much as they're scaring mine. I managed to pull off a charge. With 7th New York Dragoons, by the way, which is not a bad unit, and that's going to give an expensive loss to these guys. And again, pause for a second, not too long, but just a second to say, again, Bavarian player's micro is over here. I'm noticing that, and look at how aggressive I'm being against the Bavarian player. The Italian player has got a relatively concentrated battle going on. He can kind of see his whole thing. But over here, this guy's got to look here, and he's got to look over here. He doesn't really care about these two units. He cares about this. So I'm going to take advantage of the fact that he's looking elsewhere to do some stuff, and I'm really going to press hard. And I'm going to press hard. Not, oh, I forgot my general was this far up. Whoopsie daisy. I'm going to press hard because I'm going to be attriting a lot of these guys here. He's going to panic run his Garde du Corps square. He's going to retreat everything. I'm moving forward, and I'm doing a bayonet charge because when the enemy morale is weakened, when they've been attrited by small arms fire and you have superiority in numbers on a flank, you can press in like this. So I'm going to pinch this Italian line unit out. I'm going to go in with Scott's Brigade and get these guys out who are attrited. I have my general up, he has his general up, but the difference is I'm about to cause this unit to rout due to the amount of casualties and enemy presence. Oh man, you can see the shockwave blowing him back. Jesus, still pushing him. And that is a lot of casualties on impact. I'm taking him, but so is he. The Italians are no slouches in melee. And now I begin moving up my combined arms push. You could see the difference here is that my charge, I'm moving up with numbers. The second I get into combat, I'm moving up battalions, I'm reinforcing, I'm throwing more men in. My general is up. My cavalry all moves forward to cover my right flank. The Bavarian player is going to try to do something here, and we are creating a little bit of a gap in our lines. This is a bit of a dangerous situation, but the thing is he has to charge over open ground. He has his grenadiers over here. I'm going to roll up this left, and there is a gap, but again, the micro is split, and I'm able to catch the D-Firth out, which is an expensive thing to catch out, with some dragoons again, and they are now in an open position for my artillery to just start hammering them without having to worry about a field of fire. Austrian guns were finally taken out by an offensive, so we've got a lot of counteroffensives happening. I have my cavalry moving over here to try to provide support, and my 18-pound battery will see these guys out. Catch out these Jaegers. I actually didn't mean to do that. I meant to charge, but I was so busy over here microing this, I didn't mean to walk into them. That's my mistake. But it effectively does the same thing. My foot rangers finally do get routed by some guards of honor who get caught in a square, and the Russian hussars are going to be in hot pursuit. This is the problem, is you've got now a unit behind our line, but we have light cavalry plus fire support. This unit is going to feel isolated, and they're going to run. And as you can see, my cavalry has just rolled up a lot of this offensive over here. These grenadiers are finally shattered. Or broken, I should say. But this Austrian player really getting pressed hard. Dane's doing a good job of getting in there, charging in with his left guard dragoons. Left guards of horse catching out Emperor's regiment. But a lot of this cavalry is going to move over here. Fierce fighting on the right. Unfortunately, he's being enveloped. I have my cavalry to threaten over here. I do get caught in a bit of a fight with a square with these dragoons, but I do pull them away eventually. But I am able to really apply some pressure to the Italian front. Bludgeons them a little bit. I'm going to start pulling back because I want to support my Austrian ally. So I've seriously damaged and dented in the center, and I've done a lot of good damage to this side. But now I've really got to figure out a way to help my ally, because he is starting to get a little bit screwed up here. His cuirassiers are going to go in, but met by squares in the center. A bold attempt. But here's the thing. Let's pause for a second. As dire as this situation may seem, take a second and look at the units, the numbers involved here. Fresh unit of Norwegian Fusiliers, but these Hungarian Fusiliers have quite a good deal of men in them. These Norwegian Fusiliers are rather depleted. Thin lines, single file in some places. Grenzers are still healthy. A lot of healthy troops, and while he's got to fall back and reinforce, he does have a howitzer on his flank, and I have these guns, and I'm going to continuously threaten this flank, and I'm going to move to reinforce. Now, granted, I'm going to be slowed because of the marsh, but I'm in a position where I can kind of do some damage. I think these guys do square at exactly the right second to cause my dragoons to throw riders, which is always unfortunate. But it does slow them down, and any second delay I can give them will give my Austrian ally just that many more seconds of survivability. So the Danes pressing expertly, losing casualties. Let's go back to this flank for a little bit. You know, my army's moving to march over here. I'm going to throw my cavalry at these artillery pieces and capture them. Nothing too crazy. Now that I have free roam over here, I'm going to get the Bavarian artillery. The Russians are engaged in a very pitched fight. This is a very brutal battle. Specifically because, yes, they have the hill and the high ground, but their difficulty... Oh, who died? Who died? Whoop, crap, I just alt-tabbed. Whoops, hold on a second. Perks of having two monitors. If you try to click a button and your mouse moves too far, you get to go to your home screen. Here we go. Let's go back to that real quick. So who died? Who died? Oh, this was the Bavarian general. I suppose he was caught out by a small arms fire, or, oh, maybe artillery or something. I wonder how he died. Maybe he died. It looks like there's a lot of guns pointed this way. Could have been canister. Oh, it was canister. Canister from the howitzer. Yeah, that makes sense. He probably walked this way, got caught by a blasted canister. Yeesh. Anyway, let's go back to the Russian flank. You know what's happening over here. It's nothing too crazy. The Russians have a tough fight ahead of them because they want to go in. But the Bavarian forces over here and the Prussians are effectively fresh in a lot of ways. They've taken a lot of casualties. There's been some sharp fighting over here, as you can see. This unit's down to 93 men, not 103, 183. But they have a relatively fresh force over here on this left hook. So the Prussians have to be here to prevent this also relatively fresh Bavarian force from moving in. So it's a bit of a checkmate going on over here. But the Italians have vastly superior shooting. They've got a house to defend. They have cuirassier nearby, artillery general. They're in a very compact, very defensible formation. And this is exactly where the Russians don't want to be. They're charging downhill, yes, but they have to cross this creek, which is going to slow them down. And this marsh is going to slow them down even more on the attack. That'll give these Italians just that much more time to shoot at them. And these are all very good units, line infantry and grenadiers on both flanks, specifically Velite grenadiers, which are the old guard grenadiers, or the senior grenadiers, you might say, if you want to go by literal translation, I believe, of the Italian. This is a very difficult position to assault. Now, they are going to attrit them down and force them to remove themselves from that field, but the Russians are kind of running out of gas, as you could see. They only really have some depleted reserves left, but nothing too crazy. They don't have enough to really overwhelm this position, even at a bayonet charge, because now it's not even just downhill. Now it's downhill through a creek and some swampland, and then uphill into some of the best units, backed up by artillery general and light infantry and cavalry. Difficult spot to be in, just a holding position. Did manage to sneak that gun. I just sent my general on a frolic over here, Bedford Forest style. Just wreaking some havoc on the enemy lines. Nothing they can really do about it. Pinching around these stakes which they deployed on their guns. You can see they got off some small canister, but nothing too insane. I'm going to go for the Danish howitzer. My lines are coming into battle and it's forcing the Bavarian player to deploy to meet me, but the Austrians are now being caught in melee. Lifeguards afoot on the flank. And these Marines have managed to totally turn the right flank of the enemy. They won this cavalry fight. This Austrian player is in a real pickle, and if I don't really get in there fast and do something, it's not going to be good. So my Dragoons are going to go in. He's firing canister into the square Fusiliers, which is a murderous thing to do. It's exactly the formation you want to catch him. If you can't catch him in a column, you catch him out like that. See if we can catch another blasted canister from these guys. So much stuff happening. My computer's like, please. Try to get one more blasted canister. It must be so scary to be in this line, knowing that this is being prepared right next to you, seeing these guys ram home. Woof. Oh man, Caston Shield going in. Losing some staff though. He might rout on impact from that. No, he's going to rally himself. I'm trying to provide artillery support over here. Austrians full retreat, sprinting back. Again, the age-old adage of run away to live to fight another day in effect here. This will give me time to move up. And finally, I'm going to start connecting with the Danes over here. Meanwhile, the remainder of whatever Bavarians were here are going to march in, but this ground is now useless. I don't care. I don't need to defend this too much. We have this town very securely. The Russians maintaining. Over here, the Prussians, again, just watching and trying to whittle them down. These lifeguard are going to try it. They're overextended, though. The line's not moving up with them. These guys are not going to make it. I'm going to try to go for this battery. 6 men left. Ooh, too late. Too late. Too late. Set the fuse. Too late. General's going to come in, hit him on the flank. And my general dies in a duel with the Lifeguards of Horse after catching out the artillery. So the Lifeguards of Horse, after I send my cavalry all the way around to catch the artillery, loses his life on this bold maneuver, and I do believe my cavalry will rout as a result. The whole thing. A general dying is never good in this mod, and despite having these Lifeguards of Horse engaged on both flanks, The fact of the matter is my general has died. There's a unit that shattered recently. And the lifeguards of horse, I think, are just pound for pound better than what I have. So I'm also tired. Very tired versus his tired. He's got better stamina. He has more men in this fight. And my cavalry brigade will finally break. But they traded themselves dearly. They did a lot of good work in this game. Now I'm finally able to connect with the remainder of the Danish force. My Marines finally coming on the line. Fire by rank. I can't wait for it to go away because this is just ridiculous. We got a bunch of loaded guns here not doing anything. Look at this. We're going to take fire from the enemy before we even manage to give it. Oi. Come on. We're waiting on this one guy. There we go. Nice. Marines are good. Once they open up, they know how to do. They're a little broken right now. I only took 1 battalion of them because they are the only elite inspiring unit in my army, I think. So, you know, you always got to take one of those, but they're going to get a little nerfed in the next patch, I think. I'm just trying to nail this stuff coming around. These horse guards are going to try to get my artillery. I think I do manage to hit them with canister from an 18-pounder, though, which is nice. I might not. I might be recalling incorrectly. Oh no, it was round shot and aimed super high too, so these guns take an hour and a day to reload. I'll probably lose that battery. Not without getting a good hit on the left of it.
Our men are running, sir.
This battery will come back, but I think it was just the fact that they were so attrited and they got hit with a howitzer before then that unit routes. Over here on this flank, Russians holding, the Prussians finally being engaged. On this side of the battlefield, I am beginning to move in. I've got to try to do a rearguard action against this line unit with 3 attrited versus his, but he's got 3 chevrons. Trying to save the Austrians. The Danish player really going for blood. Really doing his best to try and bring the Austrian player with him. I'm going to send my Marines in. Quite literally sending in the Marines to go help on the flank.
We have killed their general, sir.
I believe that was the Danish general, yeah. Died on the flank. The battle was won on this flank, so the Marine Corps is feeling really good about charging into a fight that's already won, but they're going to do it anyway. We're going to have a Marine-on-Marine fight. We're just containing these small little contingents here. The last company falling in the line. Marines charging into the woods.
Our men are running, sir.
And by the way, that would be the Russian general hit over here on the side. Attempting to support a charge, gets hit by, I believe, a stray round. But now the problem is the Russians are caught out. The Italians are in this house. They're still on this hill. And despite taking all these casualties, they still have a general and a howitzer that they're shooting down on. So the Russians, unfortunately, are going to lose their army over here. He's going to pull back what remainder he has. But the Prussians now are finally, with 13 minutes left in the game, engaged over here. Now, here's the funny thing. If the Bavarians do manage to kill these Prussians and win this fight, and if they preserve enough of their army, that's still quite a big threat, because we don't really have anything that can deal with it. If this Prussian player gets outplayed here by the Bavarians, or if the Russians can't contain whatever contingents are left of these Italians, this Prussian player really has to deploy whatever he has left in a very defensive position and might be out-attrited. So this is kind of a bad situation for the Prussian player now, because this army has been kept relatively fresh, and the Italians are stronger in this area, albeit with basically nothing, but still something. stronger than the Russians are. Meanwhile, me and the surviving Austrians are still way over here, and we are going to begin the long and arduous process of moving over, not without being trolled and annoyed by this last remaining Bavarian unit. I've got to deploy into a line to meet him in a moment. Show over what's going on here. So the Russians have held the hill, but they don't have artillery, so sooner or later, well, they do have the 10-pounder. But that 10-pounder is not nearly as accurate as this howitzer this close. Yeah, it's just the morale is so depleted now. Ooh, this canister is really going to screw him up. Oh, did they get in? Oh, they got in. Jesus. I didn't notice that. Wow. Oh, but they shattered. Oh, you know what it was? It was... that's not good. That's a bummer. That's a real bummer for that Russian player. That looked so good. I think it was just they were overextended. F in chat. F in chat. Nothing you can do about that. Yeah, and this is the rest of the army being... Yeah. Bavarian peels over here. Yep. All he's got is the unicorn. Me trying to deal with these fucking Bavarians over here. They're just holding me up. 3 chevrons. They ain't going anywhere. Despite the general being dead, the army being routed, they haven't gotten the message. As if the pile of bodies and every part of this battlefield isn't enough to indicate to them what the situation is. And now I've had it, and I'm going to really start hammering these guys. And now we can fast forward a little bit. We're in a bit of a lull. We got 9 minutes left in the game. So let's do the usual. Let's talk about it. What went well, what did not? Well, the micro was a really big player in this battle. The enemy tried to concentrate their force, but part of me wonders if they were too slow on their attack to really capitalize on it. The Austrian player was both the strongest and the weakest part of our link here because his army was just so thin. He didn't really have reserves. He had to cover a large part of the battlefield. Meanwhile, the Prussians were always in a position of strength, so it was difficult for these guys to do much of anything. That's a cool charge by these cuirassiers on this line. Well done by this cuirassier. Unfortunately, you're so far back, you're not really going to capitalize on it. How could he? Look at, oh yeah, he's being blown away by the machine guns that are the Prussians. Yeah, the Prussian shooting is a little crazy in this mod right now. That's another thing that's got to be a little reduced, and it will be. But he's still got to worry about this stuff on his flanks. Anyway, I was able, me specifically, I was operating, as I said, at the joint between armies, and I had this pinch point where they couldn't really move that fast in here, and if they wanted to reinforce each other, they had to do it through here. By putting my army here, what I was able to do was, as you saw, I was able to kind of punch the Italians over here and protect the front of Friedland down this road and help the Russians out a little bit. And then I was able, by being here, to kind of march over and, at least seal the deal with the Austrians. I think it's a fair critique to say maybe I should have moved a little faster to go to the Austrians, or maybe I should have realized that it was vastly more important to help the Austrians rather than go for the Italians. I think it's that probably, if I had to say what my big mistake was in this game, my big mistake was thinking that the Italians were more important. Now, granted, I did do a lot of damage to the Italians, and I achieved what I set out to do, which was kill a bunch of the enemy and conserve my army, so if need be I can act as a reserve and preserve this point of entry to Friedland. However, again, I think I should have really thought a little bit better and realized, you know what, there's only one army fighting this Russian player here. There's really two armies fighting this Austrian player over here. And I think that's really my mistake, is I think I misjudged where the most vulnerable part of our line was going to be. Even though Austria was indeed the strongest army on the field, they were still outnumbered by a relatively concentrated army. I think the Bavarian player had a little too many units over here to try and hold me down. I think maybe a few of those could have been over here, and I think the Grenadier Charge on this flank by the Danish player was a bit of an overstep, because those are two very expensive units to suffer casualties and energy expenditure that early in the battle against such a fresh army. It would have been better to have them here to really punch in the Austrians a little bit more. So that's my big mistake, is I think I went when I achieved my breakthrough. Oh, I think that's the death of the Bavarian general. Yeah, I think this game we just charged in. We called it quits here. When I achieved my breakthrough here and I seized to this point, I really should have been focusing more on the Austrian side. But the Austrians did an excellent job of holding on to the last, and I did manage to come in at the last moment to reinforce the Austrians. But it was real tough getting over there. So, funnily enough, I was the smallest army on the field, but I killed the most of the enemy and took the least casualties, and I specifically attribute that not to my skill, but I think, again, I got very lucky where I was fighting the joint between two armies who were already focused on the front of their enemy, and I was fighting an asymmetrical battle where my strength was where the enemy was weak. The Austrian player did a lot of damage. He killed the most, but he also took the most casualties, so a very big brawl going on there. The Danes and Dan the Mantis was the Bavarian player that was reinforcing Mobster, who was the Danish player. You could see they actually had numerical superiority on the Austrians, and pound for pound, it really wasn't that asymmetrical of a fight numerically across the battlefield. We obviously had the biggest armies overall, but I don't think the gap was that big. Let's do our usual math at the end of a battle to see what's going on here. 3,688 plus 3,502 plus 3,247 plus 3,499. So my team had just short of 14,000 troops, and the Bavarian Imperial Coalition had 3,353 plus 3,132 plus 3,308 plus 862. Wow, that was a small Italian army, a lot of elites. So they had 12,600 and change thousand men. So we had, what I say, just shy of 14,000 to their 12.6 and change thousand. So that's about a difference of maybe 1,500, roughly speaking. That's a pretty substantial difference. I think it was the bodies which really, I think that difference can be counted up to the Italian matchup with the Russians. You could see the difference here. Captain Teddy, Russian player, almost 3,500 men. Leon, the Italian player, with 2,862, outnumbered by roughly 700. This is also a bit of an asymmetrical matchup power-wise, because Italy in the mod right now is a little bit underpowered, but they could still punch people in. I mean, he won. He beat the Italian player. The Italian player beat the Russian player, for what it's worth, even though I was punching in his left flank. So let's not discount this player for the faction he played. Leon did a very good job with that. Pipax was the Bavarian player on the far side, fighting the Prussians over here. Dan was in the center here with his Bavarians, and Mobster, as you saw, was over here. That was a very fascinating fight. You could see where a lot of the kills were. Mobster really getting a lot here. 2,107. Pipax killing a bunch of the Prussians, doing his best. Dan, it was just, you know what it was? It was the link between him and Leon. And I was able to just kind of roam around in there and rumble around. But these guys performed really admirably. I was not perfect, and as you saw, I made a lot of mistakes there that cost me a lot of men. Probably could have saved a few hundred of these casualties if I just played a little better. So Nonetheless, it was a really good fight. Everybody played exceptionally well, and it was a joy to do. Again, the name of the mod is Darthmod Hardcore Realism. It's available for Napoleon Total War. It's on ModDB. Links to everything you need, including the Discord for the mod community, are in the description of this video. And I can't wait to see you again. Today is January 21st, 2022, and I bid you a very fond farewell.